This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 19th of November 2019 and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Standard, private schools top. In the Daily Nation, private schools top. In the Star, girls neck and neck with boys in KCPE. Now, as you may have noticed, we have twins.
Yes, twins.
Yes,
indeed.
Daily Nation and the Standard have both given us. What are the odds?
What are the odds? Honestly.
Isn't there a way that the editors-in-chief usually communicate with each other?
True, yeah.
To know what headline are you putting up
We don't
tomorrow?
even have a criteria for when they are the same.
Oh, goodness.
But I guess before we begin, on the upper thirds, they do have an interesting story, an arising story. US bans Wako wife and son. And in the Daily Nation, US publicly shames Wako family over corruption. And this has come after the US put a designate against Wako, his wife and son, saying basically you cannot travel
enter the country
to the US.
Now,
I had many questions. Firstly, Amos Wako is the senator.
Yes.
Current senator of Busia. So there's corruption somewhere. That the Kenyan government has
no idea about.
Or maybe also, I don't know, but he's not.
I think it really it dates back from the
Moi days?
Moi days and Kibaki days. You know, with Anglo leasing and so many other scandals.
Because quite rightly, this is not the first time that he's been banned from entering the US. I think it happened previously in the mid to late 2000s. But the question is, does the US know something that we don't know?
Or are we choosing to ignore what it is that they know? Either way, I feel like he was a powerful attorney general. He probably knows a lot of where the dead bodies are
buried.
And therefore maybe he has some inbuilt protection.
That's true.
However, a lot of people have said, I mean, who cares?
I know, right?
Yeah, who does care? But I think another point that 2M would have loved to make if he was sitting on the table, so I will do it on his behalf. He was asking the question, who does the US think that they are? Why are they behaving holier than thou? Right? They have also themselves been accused of corruption, crimes against humanity. I mean, it's a very long laundry list. So for them to point the finger at us and say, it is you.
And even some of those who have perpetrated those crimes against humanity work here.
We let them in, we let them buy businesses, we
have
let them
the black waters and the whatnots.
Exactly.
It's called bigger army diplomacy. Whoever has the bigger military, the bigger army, can dictate terms and can dictate what they want to do. All sorts of vetoes and sanctions.
So let's come back to the headlines. We have a three-part criteria that we normally use. We ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? So definitely topical. Results are just out.
And of course, congratulations to all the students. I think this is the first time that the government has ensured 100% transition rate from primary into secondary school. So I think they said all of the 1 million plus students who sat, they all managed to pass. Which is great.
It says 9,770 candidates scored 401, which is out of 500, which is pretty
although that has been lower compared to the last 2 years.
Yeah, true.
But still, also the ones who got from, I think, 300 to 400 marks has increased.
And then we have the Star, who also has a KCPE headline, but theirs is different. Girls neck and neck with boys in KCPE. So we're back to even par. I think, is it girls that were doing better in the past few years?
I think girls were doing better in the past few years, and now the boys,
However, you had an interesting point. The boys are doing better in STEM subjects.
Absolutely. Boys are doing better in science and mathematics, girls in the arts. So I don't know, something needs to happen to get girls also
doing as well. I for one had no idea that Kenyan Sign Language was a lesson.
Which is important. I think it's really crucial.
Congrats.
Well, fantastic. Congratulations, guys. So I think by virtue of them having the same one headline,
oh my goodness, this is too funny.
And by elimination, I think we have the Star as our winning headline.
Fantastic.
On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a three-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
Gado.
Yes.
So here we have Trump.
Oh my goodness, that tie.
The very signature long tie. And he's tweeting as he's walking, and you can see the Twitter birds. But the Twitter birds are going in the circle of life or circle of death, and they're turning into vultures. And the vultures are written impeachment. And I guess the context of this is that he's been defending himself on Twitter, instead of actually going to face the House on his impeachment issues.
So I guess, Gardo was telling us that his tweets might end up being the death of him.
Well, he said that his tweeting is modern day presidential, and I think we said DP is also reading from
the Trump handbook,
the modern day presidential handbook. I think we can park it. It was alright.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good cartoon, but let's park it now. What do we have in the nation? In the nation, you've got some traffic marshals there. One Raila Odinga and UHURU Kenyatta, and they're directing traffic. They've got Raila's got flags, and he's saying no way through. And as you can see, that path, that road that Raila's standing in front of is damaged. It has potholes, no culverts and pavements and all of that. So it's a slippery, dangerous road. And the diversion there is taking us towards BBI. It's a smoother road. It looks nice. And the car there is written Hustler Auto. We presume that is the driver is William Ruto. As being inevitably and
he's being forced. He's being told BBI or nothing.
BBI or nothing. I love it. It's a really great cartoon.
And I guess it's a diversion because it wasn't part of the plan.
Exactly.
When they shook hands in 2013.
They didn't know.
This wasn't part of the plan.
It wasn't change the system. Exactly. Very funny cartoon.
Yeah, so I think we park that for a bit as we consider the star.
The star. All right, here we have the star. We have a mother and her 2 children, and they are watching the news. However, she's covering their eyes, saying, no, it's not a movie, it's much worse. So I think the context here is that some of our news has been getting quite violent. Murders, rape, just like really horrific stories. So I guess, who's this? Ozone is trying to get us to question, is the news as bad as some of the violent movies that we watch? I don't know how true that is.
Well, sometimes it can feel that way.
Sometimes it can feel that way. Watch the winning headlines. Will make you smile.
Absolutely.
Shameless plug. I feel like the Daily Nation with the diversion sort of gave a very good.
I think the Trump one was a bit basic. I feel like Gardo keeps doing iterations of the same kind of thing. Over the impeachment, the tweeting.
Toss that.
Okay. I feel like Daily Nation, guys.
Star. So we give it to the nation.
Dula gives us a winning cartoon. What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. Today is inspired by a book entitled Truth. How the many sides to every story shape our reality. And it was written by Hector MacDonald in 2018. So MacDonald is a writer and strategic communications consultant who has advised some of the top 500 companies in the world. So funny fact, he actually grew up in Mombasa in the coast.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's one of us.
He's one of us.
He should come advise. He should come advise us on truth, right? But now he's based in London. So this book focuses on the concept of truth. And he says that he doesn't want to do it in a philosophical manner, but in just a very straight matter of the fact way. And he looks at how truth can be used as lies. And he argues that the truth is not as straightforward as we would assume it is, and that there are different ways to speak truth, and not all of them are honest. And so he says we can select truths that engage people, that inspire them to action, or we can deploy truths that deliberately mislead. So he says, for example, let's consider 2 statements. 1, the internet makes the world's knowledge widely available for all. Or 2, the internet accelerates the spread of misinformation and hatred. So I would say that both those statements are very true. But one statement would create a completely different impression from the other. So if you approach a person who'd never heard of the internet before and told them, this thing called the internet, it accelerates the spread of misinformation and hatred, they would then they take the internet as a negative thing. And so he says there are usually more than one truth that can be drawn from any set of facts. And this is what he calls competing truths. How 2 seemingly opposite things can both be true at the same time when told from different perspectives. And so he highlights how our interactions with people can shape our reality, especially so if a person knows more than we do, because they can then manipulate how you interpret information. And so in the book he says, it's not just that we are being lied to. The bigger and more dangerous problem is that we are being routinely misled by the truth. Wow. The truth is being used as a tool to mislead us. Yeah. And so in this book, he identifies 3 types of people who can communicate truths or lies to you. He calls them advocates, misinformers, and misleaders. And so advocates, he says, select these competing truths that create a reasonably accurate impression of reality to achieve a constructive goal. So these are people who are trying to help you, but they just kind of mislead you a little bit. Then you have misinformers who innocently propagate competing truths that unintentionally distort reality. So kind of that's the next level. Yeah. And then finally you have the misleaders who deliberately deploy competing truths to create an impression of reality that they themselves know isn't true.
Yeah. Wow.
So the fantastic thing about this book is that at the end he gives a lot of resources how people can go and check some of the facts that are given to us in the world. And one that I use regularly that I want to share with everyone is called africacheck.org. And it is an independent, non-partisan website that does fact-checking on things that politicians or governments, even journalists say about current things in Africa. So they have this thing called the Jubilee Party Tracker. So they took some of the key... Of Kenya.
Okay,
the
great.
Jubilee Party Tracker. They took some of the key promises made by the Jubilee Party ahead of both the 2013 and 2017 elections to see if they delivered on those promises. Yeah. So they looked at 11 key promises and they looked to see how they fared. So the facts that I had yesterday have actually changed as of this morning, and that's based on the KCPE results. So 54% of the promises were on track or in the works. 27% were completed and had met the promises, and 18% were broken or failed promises. So just a few examples, I'll give them quickly. Yeah. One of them was to ensure that 33% of government appointees are women. I think we know that that has been broken, right? Because I mean, 2/3 gender rule and just across all other government positions. They had a target to reach 7 to 10% of growth in the first 2 years. That was broken as well. However, they had said that they wanted to make this promise to ensure that there were more jobs for the youth. And I would say that they have actually succeeded on that front because they've increased the jobs year on year, you know, increasingly.
So that's according to Africa Fact Check.
That's according to them. Another one was to increase the national budget allocation for counties from 15% to 40% within 5 years. That promise has been kept. Increase paved road networks from 11,000 kilometers to 24,000 kilometers in 5 years. That one is in progress and ongoing. I think they're at 80% completion. And then the one that has just been confirmed today was to raise the transition rate from primary school to secondary school to 90%. They've actually surpassed that and they've managed 100%. So I think that sometimes...
I think the Jubilee government deserves a clap.
They do deserve a clap, and I feel that sometimes you can have these advocates, these misinformers, these misleaders who don't let you know that things are actually happening.
And what you're telling us then, June, and the clap wasn't sarcastic actually, because what you're telling us is that things are not as bad as they seem, as we say on Damaging Ignorance. They're not, really.
Yeah, that's very true.
Right? And let me talk a little bit about the misleaders. In one chapter of the book, he talks about how we can get misled by marketing gimmicks, particularly when we're engaging in financial transactions, which we do on a daily basis. Most of the time, we're usually shopping for things that we need, but sometimes we're also shopping for things that we want, things that we don't necessarily need, impulse purchases, things that are beyond what we had budgeted for. And what he's saying is people, when they're engaging in subjective valuation, ought to try and lift themselves from the subjectivity as much as they can to try and try and bring in some objective analysis to how much something is worth. So he says, work out what things are worth to you rather than being driven by the price that others put on them. And so the idea here is to be mindful when determining the value of an item. And I'll give 2 examples. Or one example, and then I'll give a story. For example, sometimes you get into a shop and it has an original price versus a sale price. And the original price is actually set to mislead you. So that when you see the sale price, you think this is...
what a bargain.
What a bargain, precisely. It's so cheap, I must have it. And yet it was out of your budget. And so he says what you ought to do is behave like an economist and ask the opportunity cost question. What else could I be doing with this money? If I buy this, what is the opportunity forgone? And those kinds of evaluations then get you to something that is more accurate, something that is independent of you, outside of those people out there who mislead you. Now, a final story just before you go.
Sure.
All right, of a company that schemed to shape our valuation of an item that is not so rare, an item that we call the diamond, right? So in 1867, by the river of South Africa's Orange River, a young teenage boy finds a diamond, 22-carat diamond.
Wow.
Whoa.
He didn't know it was a 22-carat. He just took it home to his sister and they played with it. His parents then discovered it's a 22-carat diamond. And up until that time, India, I think, produced the most diamonds in the world. And, you know, they had extracted and completed all the, you know, they'd exhausted the mines in India. And so in South Africa, a diamond rush began, and they found that there were actually a lot of diamonds. So they, you know, did a lot of mining. But this brought about one problem. Too much supply.
So the price
in the market, so the price dipped, right? And comes along a guy called Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes says, look, we have to do some sort of intervention here. He goes, he raises money, and buys out all the diamond mining companies in South Africa.
Wow.
Right? De Beers is formed, and they then become a monopoly who set the supply and thereby set the price of a diamond. But that's not enough, because now they had a second problem. You have all these diamonds, so you have too much inventory. And so they go to New York and they engage the services of a company called N.W. and Son, or a propaganda and advertising agency, who had done some work for the US government in the 1940s. And they engage them to basically market and to, you know, sell the diamond to the world. And the brilliance was that they attached diamonds to marriage, to engagement. Something that we will always...
happy and
exactly.
Something, you know, that makes us all happy, but something that we will always... People will always get married. As people eat, people born or die, the marriage is a fact of life. Precisely. And so today in the US, for example, the diamond industry is worth $39 billion. But if it wasn't for N.W. and Son and De Beers,
and their propaganda,
women would probably be wearing copper rings or gold rings. You wouldn't really care about the diamonds so much.
And guys would be happier with fatter pockets. True.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that is how subjective truths can be manipulated.
Fantastic. So he also goes to talk about artificial truths. And here he talks about social constructs. So Yuval Noah Harari, which is an author we've done here before, describes social constructs as figments of our collective imagination. So they become true only when all of us, the collective, agrees that that will be the truth. Right? So he goes on into the chapter and says how social constructs can be dangerous, but also can be useful. Now, the most useful one he sort of describes is money. So he says that few social constructs have contributed as much to human progress as money. And without the agreed stores of value, so you and I agree $1 is worth this much, and a shilling is worth this much. And that's how we go about exchanging goods for money, and it makes sense. But we have to suspend our imagination to agree that that's what it is, because that piece of paper doesn't actually hold
any value.
But all of us have to collectively agree about it, right? And so he says that we see this painfully clearly when we lose trust in, let's say, that store of value. And for instance, he talks about the Zimbabwe dollar. When it collapsed, all the paper you held meant nothing. And it's because you didn't trust the currency and you didn't trust the government that was issuing said currency. In more positive news, though, Zimbabwe has launched its dollar again. It's like a $5 and a $2 denomination, and they're going to see how it is. If the public buy into it. And I think they will build that trust eventually, and it's worth it. Then he also talks about human rights. He says that human rights was a construct that we came up with sort of around World War II when the Holocaust happened. And all of us bought into this idea of human rights and not violating them. But he says that human rights were not inherent in us. People were being enslaved, people were being slaughtered, children were working
absolutely.
from when they were
and it was legal. It was legal.
And it was legal. And he says that, I mean, even the idea of individual freedoms goes against freedom. It sort of contradictory because I should have the freedom to hurt others.
Yes, if I should have that individual freedom.
If it is really that, right? So he talks about the contradiction there. But the interesting one I think he talks about as well in terms of that freedom is that we keep adding these liberties that we're saying, nope, if you don't have this, it's a violation. In 2016, the UN declared that not having access to the internet and information was a violation of your human rights. People like my parents would be like, what? Not having internet is a violation? But you'll find like a 15-year-old who, this is my life, right? So some of those things, Ethiopia and Uganda still leverage social media in their governments and say, you know what, exams are happening, we're switching off the internet.
Yes.
Or in Uganda, politics is happening, we're
switching it off,
we're going to tax you really highly, right? And then he goes on to talk about, very quickly, the future of social constructs. So these things, these imaginary things that we give ourselves, and the Chinese government is at the forefront of coming up with a social credit score. So the more good you do, the more access you have to state resources. So for instance, if you don't visit your elderly parents, if you park badly or you have parking fines or whatever, those things take away from your credit score.
Okay, as an individual.
Yeah, so you might find that you may not be able to travel abroad. You might find, so they're using those.
Can you get a loan?
If you, it depends. So you have to actually care about not only your financial behavior, but your actual moral
behavior as well.
Which I thought was so pretty interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So in practice, recognizing the social constructs that are being put around you and seeing how to change them if necessary, so that they're for the better of society and not for us.
Truth is a weird one.
It is. So on a day where we had a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation and a winning headline from the Star, I want to leave you with this. Shaping reality through competing truths can be disorienting and confusing, especially when we challenge long-held beliefs and truths that we have. Competing truths are affecting our everyday lives, and we owe it to ourselves and our society to get better at recognizing them, using them responsibly, if necessary, resisting them. So please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a good day.